Cheddar.
Walk into any American grocery store, and the first cheese you'll see is almost always cheddar. It's the best-selling cheese in the world, and it's been around for over 850 years. Cheddar was born in the village of Cheddar, Somerset, England. The earliest recorded sale dates to 1170 AD when King Henry II purchased 10,000 pounds of it for the royal court. That's not a typo, 10,000 pounds for one order. Even medieval royalty couldn't get enough. What makes cheddar different from other cheeses isn't just the milk, it's the process. After the curds form, cheesemakers cut them into slabs, then stack, flip, and press those slabs repeatedly. This technique, called cheddaring, squeezes out moisture and builds a dense, tight structure that holds up beautifully during aging. And that aging is where cheddar gets interesting. A mild cheddar aged just 2 months is soft, creamy, and buttery. Age it 2 years and it becomes sharp, crumbly, and intense, packed with those white, crunchy crystals that people sometimes mistake for salt. Those crystals are actually tyrosine, an amino acid that forms when proteins break down during long aging. They're a sign of quality, not a flaw. Here's something most people don't know. Cheddar is naturally white or pale yellow, that orange color, completely artificial. In the 1600s, English cheesemakers started adding annatto, a natural dye from a South American plant, to signal that their cheese came from rich, high-fat, grass-fed milk. The tradition stuck. Today, orange cheddar and white cheddar are chemically identical. It's purely cosmetic. One more thing, cheddar is not a legally protected name. Anyone, anywhere on Earth can call their cheese cheddar, which means the block in your fridge and a handmade cave-aged wheel from Somerset share a name but almost nothing else. Mozzarella. No cheese has traveled further from its origins than mozzarella. It started as a handcrafted specialty in southern Italy and became the most consumed cheese in America, almost entirely because of pizza. True mozzarella was first documented in 1570 in the Campania region of Italy, though monks in the area were likely making versions of it centuries before that. The original was made from water buffalo milk, richer, fattier, and more complex than cow's milk. That version, called mozzarella di bufala campana, still exists today and carries DOP protection, meaning it can only be produced in specific Italian provinces. The process is called pasta filata, stretched curd. Fresh curds are submerged in hot water or whey, then pulled and folded by hand until they become smooth, elastic, and glossy. The result is those soft white balls sold in brine at the grocery store. Real fresh mozzarella lasts only a few days. It's meant to be eaten immediately. But the mozzarella Americans put on pizza is a completely different product. Low-moisture mozzarella is pressed, dried, and aged slightly, giving it a firmer texture, saltier flavor, and the ability to brown and bubble under high heat without releasing water. Same name, totally different cheese. The US now produces and consumes over 4 billion pounds of mozzarella every year. It's not just popular, it's industrially dominant. And all of it traces back to Italian monks stretching hot curds by hand over 500 years ago.
Brie.
If cheddar is the people's cheese, brie is the one that made cheese feel sophisticated. It's been called the Queen of Cheeses since the 8th century, and it earned that title at a dinner table that included Charlemagne. In 774 AD, the Frankish emperor reportedly tasted brie for the first time in the Ile-de-France region and immediately demanded regular deliveries to his palace. Over 1,000 years later, at the 1815 Congress of Vienna, where European powers were redrawing the world's borders after Napoleon, brie was entered into a grand cheese competition against 60 European varieties and declared the Prince of Cheeses. It beat everything. What makes brie extraordinary is its biology. After the wheels are formed, they're inoculated with a mold called Penicillium K. Memberti. That mold grows into the white, velvety rind you see on the outside. And here's what's remarkable: the rind doesn't just cover the cheese, it ripens it from the outside in. Enzymes from the mold slowly break down the interior, turning a firm, chalky core into that flowing, almost liquid center you get from a perfectly ripe wheel. The rind is completely edible. In fact, skipping it means missing the earthiest, most complex part of the flavor, mushroomy, grassy, and slightly funky in the best possible way. But timing matters. Underripe brie is dense and bland. Perfectly ripe brie is golden, gooey, and pungent. Overripe brie smells like ammonia. You have a narrow window, and when you hit it right, there's nothing else like it. True Brie de Meaux and Brie de Melun hold AOP status in France. What's sold as Brie in American supermarkets is a milder, stabilized product, designed for longer shelf life, not peak flavor. Parmigiano Reggiano. This is the most regulated cheese on earth. Every wheel is tracked, tested, and stamped, and there's a bank in Italy that accepts it as loan collateral. Parmigiano Reggiano was developed by Benedictine monks in the Po Valley around 1200 AD. They needed a cheese that could survive long journeys, feed monastery communities through winter, and last for months without refrigeration. What they created became one of the most complex foods in human history. The rules are extraordinarily strict. It can only be produced in 5 Italian provinces: Parma, Reggio Emilia, Modena, and parts of Bologna and Mantova. The cows must eat fresh grass or hay, no silage, no exceptions. Each wheel weighs around 88 pounds and must age a minimum of 12 months, though 24 to 36 months is standard for the product you find in stores. What you're tasting when you eat aged Parmigiano Reggiano is one of the highest concentrations of natural glutamate in any food on earth. Glutamate is the compound responsible for umami, that deep, savory, almost addictive richness. Those white crystals scattered through the paste are tyrosine clusters, proof of long, slow, proper aging. Credito Emiliano, a regional Italian bank, stores over 400,000 wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano in climate-controlled vaults and loans money against them as collateral. The wheels appreciate in value as they age. It's one of the most unusual financial systems in the world, and it works. In the US, any cheese can legally be labeled Parmesan. In Europe, only the authentic DOP product can use that name. The green canister of powdered cheese on your pantry shelf and a 36-month aged wheel from Parma share absolutely nothing except the name. Blue cheese. Blue cheese might be the most accidentally discovered food in human history, and the accident happened in a cave. The legend goes like this: a French shepherd left his lunch, bread and sheep's milk cheese, inside a cave near Roquefort-sur-Soulzon, then got distracted and forgot about it. Weeks later, he returned and found his cheese completely transformed. Blue-green mold had grown through it in branching veins. He tasted it anyway. It was extraordinary. The mold responsible is Penicillium roqueforti, a close relative of the same Penicillium species Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered in 1928 when it contaminated his Petri dish and led to the creation of penicillin. What destroys bacteria in a lab makes cheese remarkable in a cave. Modern blue cheese production is deliberately engineered. Mold cultures are introduced to the milk or curd. After the wheels are formed and pressed, cheesemakers drive long metal needles through them, creating air channels that allow oxygen inside. Oxygen feeds the mold, which then grows outward through those channels in the distinctive blue-green veins. The three great blue cheeses couldn't be more different. Roquefort, made from sheep's milk in France and aged exclusively in the limestone Combalou caves, is sharp, salty, and intensely tangy. Gorgonzola from northern Italy splits into two personalities: dolce, which is young, creamy, and mild, and picante, which is firm, bold, and complex. Stilton from England is crumbly, rich, and earthy, with a depth that develops over months of careful aging. All three are legally protected, all three are extraordinary, and all three exist because a shepherd forgot his lunch. Gouda. Gouda is 840 years old and still the most traded cheese in the world, but almost everything people think they know about it is wrong. The city of Gouda in South Holland didn't make the cheese, it just sold it. Since 1184, farmers from the surrounding countryside gathered in Gouda's central market to trade their wheels. The city held special market rights granted by the Count of Holland, meaning all cheese in the region legally had to pass through Gouda. The name stuck, the cheese didn't. What separates Gouda from most cheeses is the washing of the curds. After milk is curdled, cheesemakers drain some of the whey and replace it with hot water. This rinses away lactic acid, dramatically reducing sourness and creating the mild, sweet, buttery baseline flavor young Gouda is known for. Then wheels are pressed, sealed in wax, originally to survive months-long Dutch trading voyages across the Atlantic, and aged. Young Gouda aged 1 to 6 months is smooth, mild, and approachable. But aged Gouda 18 months to 3 years undergoes a total transformation. It becomes hard and amber-colored, nearly as dark as caramel. It snaps instead of bending. The flavor develops into something almost dessert-like: butterscotch, toffee, toasted nuts packed with crunchy crystals throughout. It rivals aged Parmigiano Reggiano in complexity. The Netherlands exports over 650,000 metric tons of cheese every year. Gouda built that economy. Feta. Feta might be the oldest cheese still in active production. Homer described what was almost certainly an early version of it in the Odyssey around 800 BC, nearly 3,000 years ago. The name feta comes from the Italian word feta, meaning slice, and appears in Greek records in the 17th century. But the cheese-making tradition it describes is ancient. In Greece's mountainous regions, shepherds preserved sheep's milk by salting it and submerging it in brine, a method that kept cheese edible without refrigeration for months. By law, authentic feta must contain at least 70% sheep's milk, with the remainder from local goats. It can only be produced in specific Greek regions: Macedonia, Thrace, Epirus, Thessaly, and a few others. The cheese is formed into blocks, salted, and kept submerged in brine for a minimum of 2 months. That brine does everything. It preserves the cheese, gives it its signature saltiness, and maintains the tangy, slightly lemony flavor that makes feta immediately recognizable. The texture ranges from creamy and soft to firm and crumbly depending on fat content. Greece consumes more cheese per capita than any country on Earth, roughly 55 pounds per person per year. Feta accounts for the majority of that. Here's where it gets political. Denmark was producing and exporting more Feta-labeled cheese than Greece for decades. After a decade-long international legal battle, the EU ruled in 2002 that Feta was exclusively Greek. Danish producers were forced to rename their product. They still make it. They just can't call it Feta in Europe anymore. Gruyère. Gruyère is the cheese that made French onion soup iconic, powered the croque monsieur, and sparked a federal lawsuit in the United States in 2022. It was first produced in the Swiss Alps near the medieval town of Gruyères, documented in records as early as 1115 AD. Alpine cheesemakers needed a way to preserve the extraordinarily rich milk their cows produced on summer mountain pastures. The solution was a large, dense wheel aged through winter, and what emerged from that process was one of the most technically precise cheeses ever made. Swiss law mandates raw milk only for Gruyère AOP. Heat destroys the aromatic compounds that give it character. Curds are cooked at high temperature to expel moisture, then pressed into 77-pound wheels, rubbed with brine, and moved into humid aging cellars where they're flipped and salted by hand every week for 5 to 18 months. Young Gruyère at 5 months is nutty, smooth, and slightly sweet. At 12 months it becomes intensely savory, with fruity and caramelized notes that build with every bite. Its melting behavior is unlike almost any other cheese, smooth, even, and virtually grease-free, which is why it became the gold standard for cheese sauces and gratins. Unlike Emmental, the holy Swiss cheese most Americans picture, Gruyère is dense, with few or no large holes. The small eyes that do appear are created by trapped gases during fermentation and tell cheesemakers about humidity and temperature conditions during aging. In 2022, a U.S. federal court ruled that Gruyère had become a generic term in America and could be used by any producer. Switzerland spent years fighting that ruling. They lost. So in the U.S., the name belongs to everyone. The cheese itself still belongs to the Alps.